Hello world, and welcome back. In this section, we're going to be covering motivations of the candidate and the manager, effective communication strategies. But what I'd like to start off with first is to ask you, what is the purpose of the interview questions from the candidate's perspective? Well, they are talking points allowing you to share your knowledge and experience contributing to the success of the previous projects that you worked on. But what is the purpose of the interview questions from the perspective of the manager? It's to authenticate, not certify you. See, 1 hour isn't long enough to certify you on any particular topic. We need to authenticate. The manager needs to ask you questions that you can answer, because if he spends the interview asking you questions you can't answer, then by the end, he will not be able to measure the risk of extending you an offer. So think of the interview as an authentication process, where just as in cryptography, authentication requires trust, which means you need to behave in a way that doesn't violate that trust. How do you do this? You need to be direct, truthful, honest, transparent, and humble. So going back to the questions that you can answer, managers want to ask you questions that you can answer, and they want to avoid asking you questions that you don't or can't answer. See, that hiring decision is only based on what you do know and not what you don't know. Now, how does this translate to you and how you should behave in the interview? Well, let's start with the resume. The resume needs to be honest. You shouldn't be putting on your resume what technologies the entire organization used. You should be listing the technologies that you, on your job, were using every day. Because when you get hired, hopefully the manager is going to put you to work doing something you already know how to do, so you can hit the ground running and start contributing immediately. When the manager assesses the risk of extending you an offer, they need to know how you contributed to the success of those past projects. So questions that you can't answer are irrelevant. Any time that is spent in the interview talking about things you don't know takes away from the time you can spend talking about the things you do know. Now, one of the patterns in the core patterns mitigating risk section is don't guess at the answers. If you don't know the answer to a question because you haven't been working with that technology or you haven't applied that algorithmic concept before, feel comfortable saying, I don't know. So the manager can move on to a question that you do know the answer to. Now, this brings up a good point. Being able to say, I don't know. This is actually really important because for the manager, it's a way for them to calibrate you. They need to know what the bounds are for the things that you do know and the things that you don't know. I had this candidate one time I was interviewing over the phone, and he had an answer for everything. It frustrated me as the interviewer. I could not get him to say, I don't know. There was no way for me to calibrate, what does it sound like when he says, I don't know? How do I know, as an interviewer, of the things he was talking about, which ones he was guessing at? Because he never felt comfortable saying, I don't know. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a tool that you should feel very comfortable in the interview saying, I don't know. Be very comfortable saying that. Now, I want to move on to the conversation between the interviewer and the candidate. And this is an important topic because it will give you some of the tools to navigate the conversation. It'll give you some tools to help you communicate more effectively. and it'll help demonstrate to the manager that you're a good collaborator. For instance, don't interrupt the interviewer. Be patient. See, I used to believe that interrupting the interviewer and completing their sentences for the questions that they were asking was going to show that I understood the problem and that I knew the answer already and that I was eager to get to work. See, I thought it would impress the manager if I did this, but it wasn't as effective as I thought it was going to be. See, from the manager's perspective, sometimes they don't know exactly what they want to say. Sometimes they don't know what they want to ask. Sometimes they don't know how they're going to ask it. So, for instance, give a little bit of time between the end of the manager speaking and the beginning of when you're going to start your answer so that there's a little breathing room. There's a little delay. It has some really good positive results, and I'll explain them now. See, it has an unexpected benefit that it lets the manager feel heard. Everybody wants to be heard. Nobody wants to be shut down. Even if you think it's going to help you prove to them or impress them that you are just a fantastic wizard, smart, genius, it won't let them feel a sense of accomplishment. Everybody wants to complete their thoughts. When they do, they feel smarter. So pausing in an interview and not interrupting the manager is not for you, it's for the manager. Second, the interviewer, that sense of accomplishment, it emphasizes that you have good collaboration skills and that you're a good communicator. Also, let the interviewer struggle to find the words. It's important. If you don't let them finish their sentence, one, you're going to make assumptions about what they were going to say, what the constraints of the problem were going to be. You're going to make your life more difficult when it comes to answering the question because you didn't let them complete their thought. So it's very, very beneficial for you to just let it ride, pause, and then start to respond to their question. Now, there's one thing I want to talk about, and it has to do with ally or adversary. We're talking about the interviewer now. Is the interviewer somebody that is in an adversarial relationship with you, or are they in a collaborative relationship with you? One of the first points related to this is that the interview is not a test. Now, we've all been to school, we've all been educated, we've all been given exams where we're supposed to answer the question based on just the information that's provided, that we're not allowed to raise our hand. Now, taking tests is not a collaborative experience, but interviews, they are. Because, let's say, that first day that you're on the job, this is that day. You're being interviewed. The team is being paid money to interview you for this position. So if it is the first day on the job, you have to feel comfortable asking questions, and you have to feel comfortable having a dialogue with the manager. Avoid talking in absolutes and explore the advantages and disadvantages of one approach over another. Very, very good signs that a candidate is capable of behaving this way on the job. Now, in tests, we feel like we can't raise our hand, that we can't ask questions. But the interviewer is your ally. Treat them like the customer, because when they're going to be asking you questions, whether they're scenario-based questions or programming questions, you can treat every one of those questions like a small project. Just like any project, you're going to have a requirements gathering phase where you're going to find out from the customer what the behavior, what the functionality, what the constraints are, so that you can write an application that does exactly what it needs to do and nothing more. So feel comfortable qualifying those requirements. Be curious. Identify the context and ask questions. Brainstorming with the manager, with the interviewer, dialoguing with them is going to impress upon them that when you're working with the team, that you have the skills to collaborate, to explore ideas, explore possible solutions, and just pretend that it's your first day on the job. Now, I want to talk about one more idea. Hard questions. It's a good sign. Sometimes candidates will finish their interview and they'll come back to the recruiter and the recruiter will ask, "So how'd you do?" And the candidate will say, "It went great. I was awesome." That's actually one of the first signs that the candidate interview didn't meet the bar for the team, and that here's really the crux of it. At some point in the interviewer decided that it was more appropriate to ask softball questions that the candidate could answer, so that when the candidate left, they left on a high note. On the flip side, this is a good sign. If you're asked difficult questions, if you get to the end of your interview day and you feel exhausted and they just continue to hammer you with difficult questions that were hard to answer, that required dialogue and communication, that's a great sign. It means that the manager considered you a worthy candidate. Again, managers want to ask you questions that you do know the answers to. So when they're asking you hard questions, it means they think you're an excellent candidate for the position. That's it for this section. But join us in the next section where we cover the most important interview question. It's the start of 2 great sections with a lot of excellent content that will help you be prepared in your next interview.